All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code PODCAST5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Be Well by Kelly podcast. I'm not sure if you've noticed yet, but I'm now dropping episodes on Wednesdays and on Fridays. Wednesday's episodes are themed Wellness Wednesday. This is where I'm bringing on researchers, doctors, and entrepreneurs in the wellness space that I respect and want to share with you. Fridays is Fabulous Friend Fridays. This is when I'm bringing on my friends here in Los Angeles and around the world, female entrepreneurs who are making a difference and charting their own path. This is to keep you motivated and share some really beautiful stories. Today is Fabulous Friend Friday, and today's guest is Catt Sadler. Catt Sadler is a 3-time Emmy-winning journalist with 20 years on-air experience. She's well-renowned for her work on E! Entertainment, where she spent more than a decade contributing. She has been a fixture on the red carpet, covering high-caliber events and interviewing celebrities during award season. After choosing to leave E! over a wage gap issue and receiving an outpouring of support, Catt became a prominent voice for the equal pay movement. She is currently executive producing and hosting her popular podcast, Naked with Catt Sadler, and her guest includes stars like Jennifer Lawrence, Olivia Munn, and Kate Bosworth. Okay, Catt, now it's time to tell your story. When did you know you wanted to be a journalist? Take us back as far as we need to go to when the passion started.
Okay. Wow, we're going back. Well, let's see. I've been in LA 13 years now. So I am, and by the way, just so you know, I'm way more comfortable being where you're sitting because, I ask the questions. I don't talk about myself as much. So I'm trying to get better at that. So, I am from Indiana, born and raised. I'm an Indiana girl. I was born in a really small town called Martinsville, Indiana. Population like 40,000, not like stoplights
10 people
in the street. They're in the town. Yeah, exactly. And I was back and forth a lot growing up between Indianapolis, the big city, which was an hour away, and Martinsville, which is the small town that both of my parents are from. And as the little girl, I had my older sister, Jane, my younger brother, AJ. We grew up in a pretty traditional household. My mom at that time had been married twice. So my stepdad did most of my child rearing. And I was in everything. I was pretty busy. I was very extroverted. I loved sports. I loved playing sports. I loved ballet. I was in theater. I was in drama, everything. I was a really active little girl. I was like that girl that liked school. I just was like really pretty happy. And I remember my mom said this about me when I was in kindergarten. She was like, or no, not my mom. My kindergarten teacher wrote on my report card, Kathy. By the way, I was Kathy.
Oh my gosh.
Kat was always my nickname.
Yeah.
But Catherine is my given name. Kathy was what I was called. Kat was my inner circle. Kat was my nickname.
Oh, you are such a cat. I can't even imagine you as a Kathy.
I know, but my kindergarten teacher said, Kathy is everybody's best friend. And that was like lovely, but that was, I love people. I did then. And by everybody. And I think that's kind of been true to how I've lived my whole life in high school and everything. I was in the plays and in the drama department, on the one hand, but I was a varsity cheerleader. So I was always in and out of all the cliques.
So involved.
Yeah. And I liked all kinds of people. I could connect with all groups, all types. And let's see, I then, after high school, went to Indiana University.
Okay.
And it took me a minute to figure out what I was going to declare as my major. I was not at all somebody who knew right away and had it all planned out. And I eventually, my junior year, my mom was finally like, I think I studied like environmental studies for a little bit. I jumped around. I wasn't sure. And she's like, what are you doing? I wanted to actually pursue drama and theater, but being from such a small town, and that just did not seem like the practical path one should take.
So when you say theater, are we talking Broadway, New York, or were you more interested in being an actress and being on TV?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I was that little girl with the home video camera. Mind you, this was decades before iPhones. And that was what I did for fun with my friends on the weekends. I would film them. They would film me. I would direct. I would write plays. We would do commercials. I would have the hairspray in my hand and I'd be like doing like a finesse commercial. And so I just loved performing, but I also loved interviewing people. So I would do these fake Barbara Walters interviews and I would drive everybody crazy. And I would like always stick like a fork in their face and ask questions. And so that was just what I did for fun. And that's why my mom, when I was like 19, 20, she was like, what are you doing? Oprah is your hero. Katie Couric is who you watch on TV every single day. Why are you not studying journalism? Like, get on with it already. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're so right. I should just do that. What am I going to do? I don't know at the time, like why I was so all over the place. I think maybe a lot of young people are,
Yeah.
The pressure of like, what am I going to do with my life?
Well, you already just worked so hard to get into college, and then you get into the momentum of college, which, making new friends and taking your classes. And if you're in a big school, maybe there's football and events and
boys,
all the boys and the boyfriends,
yeah.
And it can be distracting. And I think a lot of times people don't really think that their childhood passions could be a career.
I think that was it. But then, because thank God for mom, I really did start to pursue and research the Ernie Pyle School of Journalism at IU. And I found out there was a concentration in broadcasting. I was like, whoa, this is it. This is me. And I also love to write. So right away, I was learning to write for television, not write for newspapers. So I was learning broadcasting and I was, putting together packages, as they call them, and doing all the video and doing the interviews. And I mean, that was instantaneously, I was like, I found it. And about that same time, I secured my first internship at a local TV station. And that's when it just like and the sky opened up and I was like, I could have worked 24 hours a day. When you love what you're doing, it didn't feel like work. All of those things you hear, it was just really true. I wanted to write. I wanted to learn. I wanted to pretend to be on TV every single day. And I was still actually, I graduated while I was still working at this local TV station as an intern, but had actually gotten hired as a part-time general assignment reporter. I'm kind of jumping the story, but that was my starting ground for getting into TV.
So you get this internship, you're offered a job, you're willing to work 24 hours a day, you're doing what you love. What does a day in the life of Catt look like then?
Then, oh my gosh. Well, I was also in a band.
Oh my!
I was in an all-girls band called the Gypsies. So that's how I made most of my money. I was like We even recorded some music, believe it or not. This is so bad, but we would perform in like bars and nightclubs and do like New Year's Eve gigs and stuff. So I was a backup singer. I was not the lead singer.
I feel like this needs to be your intro song.
My gosh.
I need the MP3.
Oh my gosh. He's So Shy, the Pointer Sisters. We covered that. Do you even know that? I have my intern Katie in the room. She's like, who are the Pointer Sisters?
We're dating you.
Yeah. I was really at a crossroads. I mean, I'll answer your question in a second, but that just reminded me that at that time in my life, college was coming to a close. I was interning at a TV station. I was working part-time at that TV station, and I was still in a band. And I remember I was taking a hot bath one night. My mom's going to be like a regular occurring component to all of my stories, but she was like, I think you need to pick, like, is it going to be like the music route or is it going to be the TV route? And I love singing. Anyone who goes karaokeing with me is forced to hear me sing all the time.
What's your karaoke song?
I love Sweet Child of Mine.
Okay.
Guns N' Roses.
Classic.
I mean, I don't know. I love some Diana Ross. Diana Ross, I know most of her songs also. But my mom was like, what's it going to be? And I knew in my heart of hearts I was never going to have a career as a singer. I just loved it so much. I love music. And I was like, okay, I think this TV thing is the more practical thing to pursue. And so that was what those days looked like, where mostly it just consisted of going to the TV station. And, that was my family at the time, is getting to know, everyone from the editors to the writers to the producers to the weather guy. Brian Wilkes is one of my best friends, and he was so great to the young people at the time that were just starting out. Those people really matter and stay with you.
Were you given a chance to interview people?
Yeah. So before they actually hired me as a part-time general assignment reporter, I was always in the news director's office, and I was always saying, will you look at this tape or tell me what I'm good at or tell me what I'm bad at? And he was wonderful also, Ron Petrovich. It just so happened that at the time they were creating a segment called Youth Matters, and it was on the 10 p.m. news, and it was about young people in the community of Indianapolis. And he was like, we were thinking it would probably be a more compelling weekly feature if we had a young person fronting it and doing the work and talking to the people. And I was like, what? He's like, so get with the guys, go upstairs. We're going to create a set for Youth Matters, this segment on the weekly news, and let's see what you can do. So I was like, I went to BB. Remember BB? Yeah. Is BB still around? It is, right? BB clothing? Baby?
Yeah.
BB? Whatever.
Yeah. There's rhinestones on everything.
It was so cute. We're talking 97, you guys.
It was like a mix of Lycra and rhinestones.
Exactly.
Pair of those with some rocket dogs and you are good to go.
Well, back then they made some really nice pantsuits.
Yes.
And I remember I bought like a charcoal silver gray pantsuit. I spent way too much money, more money than I had. And I bought this pantsuit and we recorded a fake Youth Matters segment to see if the boss liked it. And he liked it enough that I got that job doing that work once a week on TV. So it was like my secondary college. I was just learning. I was so green. I was so bad, but obviously, I guess good enough that he let me be on TV. And I may not have even graduated college at that point. That was like my senior year of college, which was, an outstanding opportunity because Indianapolis is like the 24th biggest market. So it was considered a big market as far as that goes in local television.
Wow. So how do you make the transition from Youth Matters to E-News?
Great question. Well, I did a little bit of general assignment reporting in Indianapolis, which means like, I'm so bad at this, but it was like, I remember vividly one of my first live shots was about a teenage girl who had a baby. And I can't even say it. This is why I couldn't do the story, because she had murdered her child. And they're like, go out and interview this chick and like, or her family and all these this catastrophic stuff that you do see on the local news.
Horrific.
And that was my job. And it did not agree with me. I knew that my passion was fashion and arts and movies and music and entertainment. That was my passion, and people and their stories, but not this kind of news reporting. I think a lot of us find out what we don't want to do by living through experiences. And that was one of them. I was like, I don't want to be this kind of reporter. And I don't want to go chase fires. Doesn't do anything for me. It just wasn't serving my soul. And but I was getting great experience. I learned to write. I learned to be on TV. I learned to put a story together. So that served me for sure. But I knew without even probably expressing it that my dream was to, what did I do in my spare time? Watch E! I was living in Indianapolis or watch, VH1 Video Countdown, with Rachel Perry. Do you remember her?
Yes, I do.
Like that's what I wanted to do. And this is kind of a long story, or we'll be here all day, but I got a call from a guy in New York who saw me on TV. And he was Ezra Marcus with this agency called NS Beanstalk, which is a big time news agency who at the time they represented like Diane Sawyer and Dan Rather. And he called me, he found me in my little newsroom there in Indiana, and he kept calling me and I didn't even know what an agent did. And he's like, well, I'm an agent and I saw you on TV and I would like to work with you on your career. And I was like, I gotta go bye. Like I was just it was so foreign to me. I didn't really get it.
Did other journalists in Indianapolis have representation?
Yes, they did, but I didn't learn that until a couple months later. I was at dinner with the main anchor of our news who had been doing this for a decade at least. And I started to tell my story. I said, I've been getting these calls from this guy named Ezra at NS Beanstalk in New York. What should I do about that? And Adam Shapiro falls out of his chair at the table and he's like, what? And he's like, I've been trying to get them to represent me for 10 years. He's like, what do? You go home, you apologize, you call him tomorrow, you send the tape. By the end of the week, you put it together. Duh. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. Just that naive.
Screening the largest agency's calls.
Screening.
Stop calling.
Well, because you have to keep in mind, I don't even know. I must have maybe almost been 21. And I just thought it was a joke. I was a joke. And he was clearly scouting young talent. But he was the guy that I, for the first time, articulated what I wanted to do with my career. And he's like, what do you want to do? And I'll never forget that call because I was like, you mean I can just dream? I can tell you.
You can dream it up.
Go that big and tell you what I really want? Like no one had really asked me that. And so I said what I had just told you. I said, well, I want to be on television. I want to tell people stories. I want to interview people, but I want it to be about the things I care about. And that doesn't happen in Indiana. That doesn't happen in most places, especially pre-internet. It was just television, So it wasn't like we were all on whatever, yahoo.com.
Yeah. You don't have your own YouTube or Facebook show.
Exactly. And so he said, if that's what you want to do, we'll engineer your life to get you there. And that's absolutely within reach, Entertainment Tonight and E! And all these things. And I had never even been to California or New York at this point. So that seemed like an almost impossibility, but enough so that I'd had enough work in Indianapolis that year. I was putting a lot on tape. It was very much about your reel. That was all you had back then. And my best friend was living in Santa Monica. She graduated a year before me. And she said, you belong here. You have to come out to California. And I was like, but I actually have a job on TV in Indianapolis. And I remember I told my mom and I told my agent, I said, I'm leaving, I'm going to Hollywood. And they're like, you're what? And they were like, no. I was like, no, that's not how it works. We have to get you a job before you leave. I totally freaked him out. My mom was conflicted because I think she always knew that's where I was going to end up, but she really didn't want me to leave, because I did have this great job and that's scary for any parent to watch their daughter get up and fly away.
And when you were on air in Indianapolis or on TV in Indianapolis, how often, it sounds like you're really close with your mom. How often were you seeing her?
Well, she was there with me then. So we lived like 10 minutes away.
Okay. So a little bit probably had to do with losing her baby girl.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She'll tell you the story at the airport. I was fine. I was like, my mom and I have an interesting relationship because we're not needy. We don't talk every day. Like some girls talk to their mom every day. To this day, my mom and I, we can go a week and we check in and we send a couple texts, but we're not, my mom's never been that I have to call her at night and tell her my whole story. And she's too busy for that. Also, my mom's amazing powerhouse of a female. So she doesn't need to hear my messy details of my everyday, but that was really hard on her far more than it was on me. I was like, I am out. I am going to, the pull was so strong.
And what do you think it was that gave you the confidence to just do it? Because I think a lot of people probably listening and a lot of women out there want to feel empowered. And, they listen to, the Tony Robbins, the Rachel Hollises, like you can have whatever you want. And then there are certain people who I meet like you are just like, yeah, I'm going to jump on the plane and go. Like I deserve this. And I'm going to say yes to my dreams and I'm going to dream big. Like what makes Catt different? And why, what do you think it was?
Back then, it was probably a combination of naivete and confidence and self-esteem, because I was raised by a very strong female who definitely said to me repeatedly, I could do and be anything I ever wanted to be and to dream it. Even when she probably didn't believe it, like she would always say that if I want to be a doctor, you can do that. I was never going to be a doctor. But I heard that soundtrack repeatedly. So it was probably a combination of both and just this insatiable curiosity and appetite. I've always had that. That's always been there. And energy is huge to me. And I think I'm really in tune with that with myself. I always have been. I don't know maybe if that's just how I'm wired or why that is, but I just always somewhere in the back of my mind knew in that small town life when things were the same and they were on repeat and everybody looked the same and everybody felt the same and everything was it was rather mundane for me. It just didn't feel like that's all there was. So when my best friend called, she's like, you can sleep on my couch, come out to LA. It was just like the natural evolution of what was supposed to be, I guess.
Do you remember that plane flight?
I'm a little cloudy on it because there were a couple different, that plane flight, I don't think I do.
It's just like sometimes there are almost like frame images of when you decide to do something. Like I remember the minute I decided to leave cancer and genetics to start Be Well by Kelly, I was running around the Brentwood Country Mart. My best friend Angela was like, what are you doing? You have to start this business full time. You have to help people, and I'm sure you remember like hugging your mom at the airport, or you remember.
I remember what I wore at the airport because I have a picture.
There you go.
I remember my mom and she looked like very sad and I looked, she looked less sad.
You're like, bye, I'm out. Okay.
So but it's funny because to answer that question, a lot happened that summer. It was like a period of 3 months. I remember the next plane flight vividly.
What happened?
Well, I moved to LA. I lived with Molly and I did sleep on her couch. And all the while, my agent was trying to help me figure out my next job. I was going on infomercial auditions. I was an extra on VH1. I was like just showing up anywhere and doing anything in Hollywood because it was just so exciting. And I was a cocktail waitress on the campus at UCLA. I was terrible. I'm a terrible waitress. I couldn't remember anything. I was way too into talking to everyone. And my agent left a message on our answering machine because we're talking pagers and answering machine, you guys. And he was like, I got you an interview. There's a TV reporter position in San Francisco on the WB. Back when the WB was the WB. I'm so old. Is it so crazy? You're like, wow. You're looking at me like, then? Anyway, and he was like, they are casting for a young entertainment reporter that will do feature interviews and fashion and beauty and boutiques and restaurants and it's lifestyle this. And they want to fly you up to San Francisco to interview for this job. And it was like, the best call. I mean, probably the second. There was one other call in my life that was probably the best call, but that was the second best call I ever got because I was like so ready. I was so excited. And I remember flying up for that at probably 22 years old. And I remember looking out over, I'd never been on a plane in California and seeing the mountains and seeing the ocean and all of that was so dreamy. And I remember writing on a yellow legal pad on my way to that interview, all of these just affirmations. That's always really served me really well. read those kind of books. I digest those all the time. And I was just writing why this is my path and how grateful. I was just so grateful because even if I didn't get the job, just that I was living in this world of possibilities that were way bigger than I had ever thought were going to exist. So I got that job.
You know, what's interesting about that is just the gratitude. I think that being thankful, even if you weren't to get that job, being thankful to jump on that airplane and have the opportunity to interview, to be living on the West Coast, the best coast. Sorry,
yes,
guys. And to have the opportunity to follow your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So you're up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
You're an entertainment reporter. Sky's the limit.
This is the best days. Best days.
How long were you in San Francisco before you made your way back to LA?
I was in San Francisco for about 3.5 years. I was immersed because to get that job, mind you, I'd had a couple live shots on TV in Indianapolis, but that was definitely a case of faking it until you make it because yes, I've done live TV. Certainly I'm very comfortable on live television. Have you read a teleprompter? Of course I have. I mean,
Good.
What do we call that? That wasn't lying. It was embellishing a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of embellishment.
And so that for me, I was like, suddenly San Francisco is the 4th largest market. There were a lot of people watching and I was reading a teleprompter on live TV for the first time in front of the world, and I was booking my guests and I was producing my segments. And at the time you're editing with your editors, like it was phenomenal, but it was a lot of work. And I was expected to be there 8 hours a day. I was there 12 minimum. I would come in 3 hours early just to make sure I knew what I was doing. But I loved it. I mean, so I was on TV there for about 3 years. My boyfriend from college, my college sweetheart, now the father of my children, spoiler alert, he moved out a year after I had been there because he was a year younger. And we were together. We were there 3.5 years and I got pregnant with Austin.
Look at that.
Mm-hmm. I was engaged, for the record. I've never told this story either. I got engaged on Father's Day in, what was the year? 2000? The year 2000. And that was June 18th. And on July 25th, I found out I was pregnant. I was like, oh man, we just jumped the gun on that one. But we've been together for...
The best whoopsie you've ever had.
The best whoopsie. Oh my God, without question. So, because Kyle and I had been together 5-6 years at that point. So I have Austin in San Francisco in 2001. And then I started suffering from what so many working mothers do. I'm sure you can relate to this. I was 26. I was in a huge city away from all of my family. I was doing a job that I so loved, but I had massive anxiety. And I don't know that I had postpartum depression, although I'm skipping over another huge story that I was on bed rest from 18 weeks on during my pregnancy. I had major preterm labor struggles and I was in and out of the hospital. So I think I was like suffering from slight agoraphobia, going back out into public, being on TV, brand new mom, all of that stuff was like hitting me really, really hard. And I said to Kyle then, I said, I don't know if I can go back to work in 3 months because I was supposed to be back on TV. And it was so expensive. This was a Silicon Valley. It was like the boom. Everything was so expensive. I was like, I'm going to pay how much to like hand my baby over? I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of discussions about that. And my mom, here comes Linda again. She said, I took 1 year off. My mom's always worked also, but she said when we were young, she was able to take a year off. And she's like, you'll never get this year back.
They grow up so fast.
So fast. And so I said to Kyle, I was like, what if for 1 year we went back home to Indiana and you got like a job transfer? He had a corporate job for Office Depot. He was an executive there. He was doing really well too. It just so happened they had a position back in Indianapolis. It just so happened it was a promotion. And so everything lined up. And when Austin was 2.5 months old, we moved back to Indiana. But I remember so vividly, I was so nervous to tell my news director that I was going to quit. And the response although it was very supportive, of course, Catt, whatever you need, do whatever you need to do for you and your family. It was also such a feeling from everyone around me professionally. It was like, oh, isn't that cute? She's done. She's going to go be a mom. It wasn't like
it was an actual pause in your career and you were taking a minute to spend time with Austin.
They wrote me off. They were like, oh, that was cool. Now go have fun back in India. I'm going to be a mom. I said, no. I want 1 year. I'll never get this year back. And I again, thank God I'm pretty in tune with myself. I just knew what I needed, and I needed some time. And I had the support of my mom and the people around me, loving me, supporting me, to say, that's okay. You take the time. You have permission to do that. But I made a deal with myself. I said, by the time he is a year old, I will be working again in television. That is going to happen. I'm going to declare that's going to happen. We moved back home to Indianapolis, and on March 8th, his 1-year birthday, I signed my next contract back in Indianapolis.
It's manifestation. You just manifested what you needed. You said, I need time with Austin and it's going to be okay. I think so many people are afraid to take a break. I mean, I feel the pressure.
We all do.
I feel the pressure to get back out there and not let the momentum stop. But it's like, if you take a break from anything, Instagram, social media, you say no to a few events, you take a breather and you come back. And it's like no one's missed you, or there's been no break in time. And if you need that break for yourself, especially postpartum, people talk about postpartum depression, but the incidences of postpartum anxiety are 10 times more than postpartum depression.
Yeah.
Think about it. You're keeping a child alive and you're sleep deprived and you're worried about what your next career move is going to be. Should you stop working? Should you stay in your role? I mean, I'm proud of you. I think that takes way more strength and confidence to go home and then get back out there than to push yourself with adrenaline and cortisol and all of those, I actually think it's amazing that you did that, and probably really good for your career. I think as long as you are setting a goal and saying, okay, I need a break right now, but on this date, I'm going to get back out there. I mean, you did it.
Yeah.
So was that with E! News?
But I do think you're exactly right. So many of us, so many women. I mean, it's the what ifs, the fear of what the loss will look like. And I do think there's more power in just the belief. And I think there is reward in having that courage to step away. You might be surprised how much more will come your way by not holding so tightly.
I mean, I can't agree with you more, just because I think it's scary to stop. It's just so scary. Like you're saying, it's the fear, it's the what ifs, it's everyone's doing X, Y, and Z, and everyone's moving 1,000,000 miles a minute, and they're producing so much content and they're getting so much stuff out there. But how much better would that content be? And you can be so much more true to yourself when you go inside yourself, which takes time.
Yeah.
And if you're not giving yourself the time to do that, how will you know what you want to do, where you want to be? Even to be a good mom, I think you have to be confident, and you have to have a certain amount of self-care.
Oh, most definitely.
So
most definitely. And that's a lot of that's a lot of what new moms are learning, which I know you're right in the middle of that season right now. But there is, it's self-love. And then it's also, the beauty of learning that you're not just living for yourself, you're living for someone else. So how are you going to be your best for them?
Right. I mean, it sounds like your mom was her best for you. She took that time off and instilled in you that you could be anything that you wanted in this world. And I think that's so important as a parent to instill that in your children, because what you say to them becomes their inner voice.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have a pretty confident one, which is amazing.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I'm also a hot mess. So don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm just like anybody else, at this particular season in my career. What am I doing? It's different. I'm in a transitional phase, and I suffer from the same thing that all of us do when we open up our phones and we look on Instagram. They're doing so much. They're producing so much. When's my next big announcement so that I'm validated and that I matter? Like, I think all of us have that going on. I think it's important to manage it and to try and talk it down. I have to work on making sure I don't have those thoughts, but I do. But I have learned self-care. I think that's, again, to my mother's credit. I've never apologized for having to take care of myself. You know, I remember Oprah talking about that, like that once upon a time she did this big episode and it was about when like self-care and self-love and putting yourself at the top of the list. Like back in the day, that used to be considered selfish, right?
Absolutely.
But it's so not. It's the opposite. Whether it's hot yoga today or reading a lot or trying to meditate or all these things that I now try to do, all of that just helps me, be better for all the people that I care about and love, but also it keeps me honest because I'm in shape mentally and emotionally. So I'm not succumbing to self-loathing because I don't look like Olivia Colpo. I mean, you know,
pretty darn close, Catt.
Not at all.
Not at all. So you have this really big career on E for 10 plus years. And you had a pretty big exit. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what happened so we can understand where you're at now and what the future holds for you?
Well, let's see. The second best, or I should say the first, when I referred to earlier as I had my best call of my life, that was in 2006 when I had been back on TV in Indiana and I had my second son and I had gotten married and I was living kind of this vanilla kind of suburbia livelihood and life was good. Don't get me wrong. But I was having that itch again. I was like, okay, this has all been great. And this has been another wonderful season, but I have 2 beautiful boys. I have a career that I like, but this isn't it. So I had that same kind of pull back out to the coast and God love Ezra again. After 3 months of just entertaining the idea of working in Hollywood, I came out for a handful of auditions and I got the call that I had been chosen as a host on a show called The Daily 10 on E. So this was 2006. And I do remember that flight because I flew alone with my 2 kids and I had like strollers and car seats and the whole thing. And I remember the very nice man that sat next to me and helped me because Kyle drove one car out and I flew with the kids and this whole thing. But we had this whole new life in Los Angeles and I had a wonderful run at E. So I never want that to be misconstrued that, you know, what a dream job to have. I was living my dreams, literally, you know, interviewing Oprah and Johnny Depp and all of my, you know, idols that I never thought I would actually sit across from and work with and work alongside. And so it was really, really wonderful. And at the end, I was working more than I'd ever worked because I inherited a new show called Daily Pop. So in the last year at my year at E, I was working more hours than ever. I was coming in earlier than ever. And it was brought to my attention at the beginning of the year that I was severely underpaid. And that was a female executive took me into my dressing room essentially, and we closed the door and she told me that. And it was a time when I was really tired, right? Because I still am a single mom to 2 kids and yeah, I glossed over the divorce that will be here forever. But I am, raising these 2 teenage boys and I was getting there every day at 7. And by this time, I'm good at what I do, right? So in San Francisco, I was pretty horrible. By now, I'm actually been doing this every day for so long. And after you do a certain craft for so long, I really was to the point where I don't think I can be better. This is probably the best I'm going to be at this job. Like you stop learning eventually because I did it so much.
Right.
So I knew my worth. I knew that I was good at what I did and I was working really hard. And a reflection of that was that they gave me another show. Like you don't get another show if you're bad at what you do. So I knew my worth, I knew my value. And then it's brought to my attention that I'm severely underpaid compared to the key male on the network who is, at that time, we started the same year. We'd hosted so many shows together. We go out publicly for the PR push for the network and are kind of positioned as like the guy and girl of the network.
Everything else
equal
except pay. and what sex you are. You're a female.
Yeah,
He's a male.
Exactly.
Okay.
From the waist down.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the top too, I guess. But, and it wasn't just the little. Like, listen, I'm not a greedy human. It's not like
it's not over 10 grand.
A ballpark. It was just abysmal. It was more than double. And I knew that not only because the woman had told me this, who shall go unnamed, but also because Jason told me how much he makes. So I had all this information and I thought it would be powerful and my negotiations came up. But long story short is it did not change things. And my team asked for ballpark as I would move forward on these 2 shows and doing what I did. And they were not going to meet me there. So when that became clear to me in the months leading up to my decision, I said, my team was like, well, are you sure you really going to leave? And they were asking me to stay for a couple more years. And I was like, absolutely sure. Like, it didn't make it an easier decision and it didn't make it any less painful. But I was so infuriated and so convicted in what is right and what is wrong. And that was wrong.
Absolutely wrong. I think that, putting in one, it's going to discourage you from putting in the effort. Like, when you want someone to work hard and you want someone to give it their all, you have to give them the opportunity to earn what they deserve. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what sex they are. It matters the drive and the effort and the passion behind it. And it's something you've been passionate about since it sounds like a very, very young age. Mm-hmm. So now how do you harness that passion and desire to share content and interview people and stay out there in the world? What's happening for Catt right now?
I love how you say that, harness your power. I like that. That should be another show we do. Well, listen, I didn't know how things were going to go. Mind you, when I left and did decide to leave, the best thing that I had going on is, what we call a side hustle. And thank God that I had spent at least enough time and energy growing my blog at the time that I had a soft business model on what I could do if I did leave, how I would feed my kids, how I could pay the rent, that I knew I had a little something to fall back on so I could grow that, A, and B, hopefully get another TV gig and host again, it's not like I'm inexperienced. So I had to trust and take that leap that I could work and would work more. What I didn't expect was the response I got, because I did share my truth in my blog on my website, cattwalk.com. I just didn't know if anyone would notice. And frankly, I think the network didn't think anyone would really care past a day or two. Well, they ended up really caring, and they ended up caring because I'm not the only one. This is not a singular story. This is so many women's stories. Being underpaid, being undervalued, not getting promoted, being, witness to the boys club and how it works in our world. And although we've made so much progress, we have a long way to go. So that really resonated with people. And so it became clear to me pretty early on, months after leaving, that this has to be part of my new mission and purpose with my work. Do I want to be on TV hosting another show? Of course. Do I want to still have fun and be funny? And I love pop culture, but I have to do more with what I've been given. And it's wild because, that same girl who knew she was being pulled to California to do what some might think is frivolous work, reporting on movie stars. I just didn't know how it was going to end. And not to say that I'm ending, I'm just getting started on a new chapter, but I knew there would be something.
The theme behind everything that's happened to you is how you're going to help pay it forward and empower women to get what they deserve and to stand up for what they deserve. And how are you doing that outside of writing about it? Are you involved in any way in helping women kind of step out and demand? I know a lot of times it's weird because a lot of times I think when women start to negotiate their salary or they are demanding, they're viewed as being a bitch.
Yeah.
And they're not, it's
right.
It's a hard place to be in for a lot of women because we're more about being pleasers
Yes. Well, I've been doing a multitude of things. A lot of what I didn't expect is that, I've been on a lot of panels and I've been giving speeches. So that's like new territory for me, really. But through all of this and connecting with other women and kind of sharing my story, I've just been learning. I'm a student again. I mean, in one sense, I'm trying to be a voice. I'm not trying, I am being a voice for a lot of especially the next generation. I feel a real responsibility that I have to keep making this noise, A, for the people who don't have a platform, and B, for the next generation, so that when the next generation gets out of college, they're not still fighting this fight. I feel like that's an obligation of mine for sure. So part of it is just the conversation. There are so many panels and so many summits and so much speaking that one can do, but I am just learning. I mean, mind you, last year at E, when I was working, I didn't know when equal pay day was. I mean, I can't lie about it. I didn't know that, so now I'm aligning with all these really active women, these activists who are making this kind of change. So I've done various things. I've been on different boards or I've spoken at different events for these female organizations who are lawmakers and making the change. So that's been, again, a learning curve for me, because sometimes I get put in this position where people are like, oh, you're a poster child for equal pay. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I haven't. It's just that my story resonated. So now I think I'm in an interesting position where maybe a lot of people who didn't pay attention to this cause are. So that's been really cool. And my podcast that I am starting right now, which is at the forefront of doing multiple things, well, I'll definitely share with you, but my podcast is to keep these conversations going with the women who I admire, who, by the way, gave me the courage to even share my story to begin with. I mean, it was because the women that were speaking up in the Me Too movement, I mean, that happened about 6 months before I went public. It was because they were brave enough. They were courageous enough. They took the gamble that, oh my, this might backfire. The industry might start shutting doors. I might not get the same roles anymore. I had that same fear. What if I don't work in TV again? What if they think I'm, to your point earlier, like a diva or a bitch, or I'm going to be trouble because I did what I did. So these are the women that now I'm trying to also highlight in my podcast called Naked, which is really about getting underneath it all and stripping it down. And, in this Photoshop world in which we all live and everything's so perfectly curated and manicured, to kind of it's really exhausting. And so I would like to give women the permission to not have to do that and hear from these really visible women who are also tired of it, because I think that's where we all grow and evolve and kind of just become our better selves. There's just so much stuff today that gets in the way of that.
And on that point, what advice would you give your younger self to ensure that you were being paid fairly, or you were getting a fair shot at, the opportunities that you've always wanted?
I think I would tell my younger self to speak up more. I mean, I have always been confident, but I also think I always worked. My work will speak for itself. My work will speak for itself. If I'm good at my job, I'll get a promotion. And that's not the way the world works, sadly. I didn't knock on enough doors, and I don't know if I was actively aggressive enough about money. And I think most women operate that way. We were socialized to, that's the last thing on our list, right? Oh, I'm a team. I just want the job, or we're lucky to get the job. And that's something I've learned a lot about with negotiation in the last year. I've worked with some real experts in the realm of negotiating. And that is something I would tell everyone listening. It's like 70% of women aren't even negotiating their salary. We just take what they give us, And so I would encourage people and my younger self to take more accountability in that department. And I mean, the onus does fall on us as individuals to speak up, to have a really good relationship with your superior or your manager. Let them know what your long-term plan is. Record proof of progress, record your accomplishments, have the data, back it up, and ask for it. I mean, because if you do all that and you are communicating and you have succeeded and the numbers don't lie in whatever industry you're in, and they still don't pay you, well, then you don't want to work there. And I also think it's okay for people to find out when they are interviewing for a job, because don't forget, we also get to choose where we work. I think it's okay to say, can I be assured that if I'm hired and a male is hired and he has the same experience or similar experience and similar education and similar everything, that he's not going to make more than me? I think it's okay to ask that fair question to make sure that you really want to work somewhere. The statistics are, women are making 80 cents on the dollar. It's way worse for women of color. I'm a big believer in, again, I'm learning about intersectionality and how, sometimes I feel guilty because it's like, the white privilege part of all of this too. Like, oh, poor little white girl didn't make as many hundreds of thousands as their co-hosts, So there's so many corners of this issue. But at the end of the day, yes, I think we have to somehow fight the system, but also learn what we can do personally in the process to position ourselves better.
I can't thank you enough for telling your story, being so transparent, and giving other women the tools to negotiate for what they deserve. For people who want to follow along with Catt's story, definitely check her out on Instagram at Catt Sadler, read her blog at thecattwalk.com, and follow along on her podcast, Naked.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.